Forget every optimistic sci-fi story you've ever heard. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war and a flicker of something far more desperate: hope. But what does hope even mean in a universe where the only constant is suffering and annihilation? Prepare to explore the chilling, often heartbreaking struggle for a reason to exist. The universe should be silent, but in the 41st millennium, silence is extinct. Every star system hums with death.
Every world burns in the name of survival. The galaxy is a vast graveyard of empires long forgotten, and humanity, the last echo of its own glory, endures not through brilliance or unity, but through sheer, agonizing stubbornness. There are no heroes here, no victories that last, only moments, brief flashes of defiance before the endless night returns. The Imperium of man spans 1,000,000 worlds, yet it is dying on every one of them. Its citizens are born into servitude, live in ignorance, and die nameless beneath skies choked with the smoke of devotion.
From orbit, their cities look like candles, countless, fragile, flickering lights trying to imitate the Emperor's sun, and like candles they are easily snuffed out. Each day, billions die in his name. Each second, another prayer rises through the smoke, begging for salvation that will never come. This is the age of the Imperium, a time when faith replaces truth, and ignorance becomes armor. The Emperor, entombed on his golden throne, does not answer. He cannot. His body is a corpse, his will, a machine's memory, and yet, he is worshipped as God, because the alternative, that mankind is alone, would destroy what little sanity remains. That is the brilliance of the Imperium's lie. It turns despair into doctrine. It teaches its people that suffering is the purpose, and somehow, it works. Picture it, a hive city the size of continents. Trillions of lives stacked in towers that pierce the clouds, their foundations built upon bones. Down in the depths, the air tastes like rust and sweat, and the people worship the idea of work as holy. They know nothing of the stars above, where fleets of ancient warships exchange fire across light years. They've never seen the angels of the Adeptus Astartes, or the horrors that come for them in the dark. They only know that tomorrow will hurt as much as today, and they endure it anyway, because in the Imperium, endurance is the only definition of hope. To the untrained eye it seems pointless, a civilization built on ashes, fighting wars it can never win. But if you look closer, beyond the propaganda, beyond the chanting masses and burning cathedrals, you find something raw, almost holy. A child in the underhive saving a scrap of food for her brother, a guardsman charging an orc line, knowing he'll die, but doing it anyway. A tech priest repairing a generator to keep a single district from freezing. Tiny acts of defiance, meaningless on their own, yet together, they form the heartbeat of humanity. That's what hope looks like in the 41st millennium. Not victory, not peace, just the refusal to die quietly. Hope in the galaxy of the 41st millennium is not a gift, it's a trap. To understand this, you must first accept a truth that no imperial citizen can ever speak aloud. The Imperium of man was never meant to last. It was forged in conquest, maintained through fear, and now survives only because no one can imagine what comes after it. The machinery of the empire grinds on, powered by faith, bureaucracy, and corpses. Every victory the Imperium achieves costs it more than the last, and yet, it keeps going, because stopping would mean looking into the abyss and admitting that there's nothing left to fight for. Warhammer's universe was not designed to uplift, it was designed to strip humanity bare. It shows us what happens when civilization becomes ritual, when knowledge is heresy and progress is treason. Every forge world, every shrine, every cathedral is a monument, not to triumph, but to survival. Humanity has outlived its gods, its reason, its future, and yet it remains, clinging to the shadow of what it once was. The Adeptus Mechanicus prays to machines it no longer understands. The Astra Militarum sends soldiers to die for wars no one remembers starting. The Ecclesiarchy preaches salvation in a universe that has forgotten mercy, and above them all sits a dead god, a withered corpse, whose divinity is the only thing that keeps the warp from devouring reality itself. In this universe, hope is dangerous because it implies change, and change, in the Imperium, is the greatest heresy of all. The moment a man believes things could be better, he becomes a threat. His optimism is a spark, and the Imperium is built entirely of dry tinder. So, hope is crushed, controlled, weaponized. It's repackaged as faith, not in the self, not in progress, but in obedience. Suffer today, the preachers say, for tomorrow belongs to the Emperor, but tomorrow never comes. And yet, paradoxically, it is this very suppression that keeps humanity alive. The Imperium cannot offer joy or freedom or peace, but it can offer purpose. Every life, no matter how small, has a role to play in the endless machinery of survival. A guardsman dies, so that another might hold the line. A mechanicus priest prays to a cog and believes it keeps a reactor burning, and sometimes it does. Even despair itself has meaning, because through it, humanity remains human. That is the irony at the heart of Warhammer 40K. The same system that enslaves mankind also protects it. The same faith that blinds them also sustains them. This is not a story of heroes. It's a story of endurance. And endurance, however fragile, is a kind of hope, kind that refuses to die, no matter how many times it's buried. Because if the galaxy has taught humanity anything, it's that extinction is easy. But enduring is divine. At the center of mankind's despair sits a throne, and on that throne, a god who cannot die. 10,000 years ago, the Emperor of mankind brought unity to a fractured species. He banished superstition, shattered gods, and promised reason and order. But even he, in his brilliance, could not escape the truth that defines all human history. Everything built by hope eventually devours itself. Now the Emperor is no longer a man, he is an engine. His withered body is fused into the golden throne, a machine of divine horror that burns 1,000 psychers a day just to keep him alive. Each soul fed into that mechanism extends his existence a few more moments, and keeps the Imperium from collapsing into madness. It is the most sacred slaughter in human history. The irony is cruel. The Emperor fought to free humanity from gods, yet became one through death. He was never meant to be worshipped. His empire was meant to be rational, scientific, pure, but reason cannot survive 10,000 years of war. So humanity did what it always does when terrified. It turned faith into armor. Now, entire galaxies pray to his corpse, and the echoes of that prayer ripple through the warp. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guides Imperial ships through hell, is fueled not only by his power, but by billions of prayers screamed in fear. Faith sustains the Imperium. Faith kills it too. And yet, deep within that paradox lies something hauntingly beautiful. Every soul sacrificed on Terra believes their death matters. Every guardsman who charges into certain doom does so in his name. Every worker who breaks their back for a world they'll never see believes, utterly, that the Emperor watches. Their faith may be born of ignorance, but it is also love, twisted, brutal, unending love for a father who no longer speaks. Perhaps that is why the Emperor endures. Perhaps he cannot die because humanity refuses to let him. The psychers who serve the Imperium sometimes speak of the Astronomicon as if it breathes. When they close their minds to the warp, they say they hear something faint within its hume, not a scream, not a word, but a heartbeat. A reminder that something at the core of humanity is still alive. It may not be divine, it may not even be sane, but it is proof that despite everything, the despair, the madness, the cruelty, the human spirit continues to fight. That is what makes the Imperium both horrifying and magnificent. It does not live because of hope. It lives as hope, a broken, bleeding, half-dead thing that refuses to stop breathing. Because even in the grim darkness of the far future, when reason has died, when mercy is gone, when the Emperor himself burns the souls of his children just to hold back the night, humanity still whispers the same fragile, impossible prayer. There must be something worth saving. The Imperium's history is written not by heroes but by the anonymous dead. For every space marine who falls in glorious battle, 1 billion faceless souls vanish in silence. For every planet declared secure, 1,000 more burn unseen. Humanity's triumphs are measured in the ash of its own extinction. To understand hope in the 41st millennium, you must look not to the saints or the soldiers, but to the masses, the billions who live, toil and die without ever leaving the shadow of their hive walls. They are the true heart of the Imperium, and their hearts are breaking. A hive city is a planet's confession, a monument to survival built from fear. From orbit, it shines like a jewel. From within, it stinks of oil, sweat, and the sweet rot of too many lives packed too close together. At the top, noble families live in palaces of stained glass and prayer, their bloodlines tracing back to forgotten conquests. They speak of honor and purity while feeding on the labor of those below. And below them, the world turns to black. The underhives stretch for miles, a labyrinth of rusted corridors and perpetual dusk. Air recyclers groan, water tastes like metal, and light is a privilege. Children are born into darkness and never see the sun. Every breath is a prayer to keep the machinery running. Yet within that decay, life persists. A worker shares half her ration bar with a dying friend. A mother carves the Aquila into her son's toy, so he'll remember faith before starvation. A young man dreams of enlistment, not for glory, but for a clean death beneath an open sky. These are not grand acts of courage. They are acts of continuance. Even as servitors drag away the corpses of the day's laborers, the next shift steps forward without hesitation. They know their fate. They don't resist it, because in the Imperium, resistance is useless. But duty is divine. The ecclesiarchy calls this the Emperor's test. Each life, no matter how brief, is weighed in the balance of faith. To live and die without question is the highest form of worship. And yet, the Emperor's silence haunts them. There are whispers in the underhive, rumors that the saints who rise in flame are not miracles, but accidents of the warp. Those visions are madness. Those prayers echo not through heaven, but through the void. Still, they kneel, because what else is there to do? To lose faith in the Emperor is to lose the last thread of sanity binding mankind to itself. Hope doesn't shine here. It simmers. It hides in gestures too small for history to notice. A shared breath, a whispered prayer, a single act of kindness in a world that no longer remembers the word. The Imperium doesn't survive because it's strong. It survives because somehow its people still try. They call them the Astra Militarum. To most, that name means little. It sounds noble, ceremonial, like something written in marble. But in truth, it means billions of souls drawn from across 1,000,000 worlds, thrown into the furnace of endless war. No soldiers in human history have suffered as much as the Imperial Guard, and no army has ever been so utterly disposable. They come from everywhere. Frost-bitten hive worlds, toxic mining colonies, sun-scorched agri-planets. Some are drafted as children, others volunteer because they believe the Guard will feed them. It rarely does. When they reach the front, the first thing they learn is that names don't matter. The second is that courage doesn't either. All that matters is that they hold the line. Picture a battlefield. The sky burns green with plasma fire. The ground shakes as titanic engines of war march across it. Imperial tanks grinding over the bones of their own dead. The air is a scream of artillery, vox static, and the ceaseless recitation of prayers. Every guardsman carries a lasgun, a flak vest, and the quiet understanding that they won't survive the day. They fight orcs, tyrannids, heretics, daemons, horrors that make mockery of sanity. But the greatest enemy isn't the foe across the trench, it's despair, because for every guardsman who falls, 1,000 more are waiting behind him. For every victory, 100 worlds are lost, and yet they keep fighting. In the death world of Gathis Prime, a regiment known as the 83rd Cadian held a trench line for 19 days against a tyrannid swarm that blotted out the sun. Out of 10,000 men, 43 survived. When reinforcements arrived, they found the survivors still standing at attention, rifles raised, waiting for the next order. None spoke, none moved, but they had obeyed. That is what it means to be human in the Imperium. Not to conquer, but to endure. Hope on the battlefield isn't a banner or a speech. It's something smaller, quieter, a guardsman sharing his last ration, a dying officer whispering a prayer to keep his squad steady, a medic trying to close a wound he knows will never heal. Each one believes their death might buy someone else a few more seconds of life. That belief, irrational, suicidal, holy, is the closest thing to hope the galaxy has left. When an Imperial officer tells his men, "The Emperor protects," it's not comfort, it's resignation. It means he's watching. Do your duty. Die well. And they do. By the millions. By the day. The Imperium's wars are eternal. Its victories, temporary. But the soldiers who die for it, nameless, faceless, forgotten, are the reason it still exists. Their blood is its mortar, their faith, its shield, their suffering, its prayer. Hope doesn't die on the battlefield. It drifts into space, between the stars, where time bends and light itself breaks apart. The Imperium's fleets crawl through the dark, each ship a floating tomb, each journey a prayer through hell. To travel between worlds in the 41st millennium is not navigation. It is faith. The navigators guide their vessels not by maps, but by madness, staring into the warp and trusting the light of the Astronomicon, the dying heartbeat of the Emperor. Every voyage is a risk. Every jump could end in eternal silence. On board an Imperial cruiser, the atmosphere is suffocating, metallic air heavy with oil and incense, the ceaseless hum of machinery echoing through corridors like the pulse of a sleeping god. Crew members speak in whispers. The walls sweat with condensation. They know what lurks outside. Beyond the void shields lies the Imperium, an ocean of thought and hunger, a realm where emotion becomes gravity and fear has teeth. It presses against the hull, whispering through the metal, testing for weakness. Sometimes, the whispers find one. When that happens, the Geller field flickers, the psychic barrier that separates reality from nightmare. And for a heartbeat, the warp touches the ship. The air trembles, lights dim, voices echo in languages no one knows. Crewmen see their dead loved ones walking through the halls. If they pray quickly enough, sometimes the light returns, sometimes it doesn't. But even here, where reason ends and damnation begins, humanity persists. A ship's chaplain walks the decks with a censer, smoke trailing behind him like a comet's tail. He blesses the bulkheads, recites the litanies of transit, and comforts terrified crew with the same words whispered in every corner of the Imperium. The Emperor sees you. He will not let you drift. The lie keeps them sane. And perhaps, in this universe, that's enough, because sanity is as precious as air. Among the crew are pilgrims, men and women who believe that traveling through the warp brings them closer to the Emperor's light. Some even smile as the storms rage beyond the walls, mistaking the sounds of daemonic claws for divine music. Their faith is madness, but it's beautiful madness, the kind that has carried humanity through 10,000 years of war. When the ship finally bursts back into real space, the stars return, the void clears, the warp falls silent. And in that fragile calm, the crew cheers, cries, prays, not because they've reached safety, but because they still exist. Hope, in the Imperium, is not about the future, it's about this moment. The next breath, the next sunrise, the fact that against all logic mankind still dares to move forward, even if the void itself wants them gone. In the 41st millennium, faith is both a weapon and wound. The Imperium of man is not sustained by science, reason, or mercy, but by belief. Belief in the Emperor, belief that his light still burns, belief that suffering itself is holy. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the ecclesiarchy rules the hearts of men. Its priests speak with fire in their lungs, and madness in their eyes. They preach that obedience is salvation, and that every act of devotion, no matter how small, echoes in the Emperor's endless glory. It is a perfect system, and a perfect tragedy. In the underhives, shrines are built from rusted scrap and broken statues. Candles burn on the bones of the forgotten. People kneel before hololithic images of the Emperor's face, distorted by static, and still they weep as though seeing him for the first time. To them, the Emperor is not a corpse. He is warm. He is the reason. He is the single constant in a universe that has forgotten kindness. So they cling to him, not out of understanding, but desperation, because the alternative is emptiness. The priests of the ecclesiarchy know this well. They stand in cathedrals that rise miles into the air, speaking to congregations that will never see their faces. Their sermons are transmitted across entire planets, broadcast through loudspeakers that never rest. Their words are simple, rhythmic, hypnotic, designed to fill the silence that terror leaves behind. To doubt is to die. To serve is to be redeemed. To love the Emperor is to love pain. The crowds answer in unison, voices trembling, their tears mixing with ash. Every syllable is a ritual, every prayer, a chain, and yet among them, there are those who truly believe. The confessors, who walk barefoot through battlefields carrying relics into the fire. The missionaries, who travel to forgotten worlds and die converting their last listener. The sororitas, warrior nuns, clad in armor that shines brighter than the sun, their hymns drowning out the screams of dying heretics. To them, faith is not weakness, it is the only proof that humanity deserves to exist. They have seen daemons tear open the sky, and planets burn to cinders. They have watched the stars themselves scream, and still they kneel. There are moments, fleeting, fragile, when faith becomes something purer than fear, a sister of battle standing amid a tide of Xenos, bleeding from a dozen wounds, whispers the creed one last time, and the enemy falters. For an instant her voice carries through the warp, a beacon brighter than the Astronomicon. That is the paradox of the Imperium's faith. It is madness, it is cruel, it is controlled. And yet, somehow, it works. Because even if the Emperor never answers, the act of believing is enough to keep the stars from going out. The Imperium's faith is not born from choice. It's engineered. The ecclesiarchy learned long ago that belief must be managed like a weapon, sharpened, aimed, and used without hesitation. 1 billion preachers across the stars maintain that weapon every day, molding despair into devotion, fanaticism into unity. Hope, in their hands, becomes a tool, and the Emperor's silence, a feature, not a flaw. Within the Schola Progenium, children orphaned by war are remade into instruments of faith. They are taught to fear doubt more than death. Every day begins with prayer, every meal with gratitude to a God they've never seen. Those who question vanish quietly, repurposed into servitors, their voices reduced to static chants of praise him. By the time they come of age, they no longer believe in the Emperor. They are their belief. When they preach, they do not speak, they transmit. When they fight, they do not think, they obey. When they die, they do not scream, they rejoice. At the top of this pyramid of worship stands the cardinal worlds, entire planets converted into shrines. Cathedrals pierce the atmosphere. Oceans of pilgrims crawl across the ground in endless procession, their skins scarred with prayers, their bones branded with scripture. Every sermon is broadcast across the void, reaching ships, colonies, even prisons. Billions listen. Few understand. None dare stop. And yet, somewhere beneath the spectacle, the truth is whispered. Faith keeps humanity docile. Without it, the Imperium would collapse in days, because no one fights forever without a reason to believe they matter. Still, sometimes, very rarely, something extraordinary happens. A saint is born, not chosen, not appointed, but ignited. A simple woman or man, often lowborn, often nameless, suddenly radiates power that no psyker or priest can explain. They burn with divine light, They heal with a touch. They lead armies that should not exist to victories that should not happen. And then they die. Always violently. Always glorious. The ecclesiarchy calls them proof of the emperor's will. The Inquisition calls them psychic anomalies. The Adeptus Mechanicus calls them unquantifiable variables. The truth, no one knows. Some saints burn like stars, their very presence warping the warp itself. Others vanish as suddenly as they appear, leaving behind relics that bleed light and bones that whisper prayers. The Imperium needs them, not because saints save worlds, but because they make people believe worlds can be saved, and that illusion, that thin veneer of holiness stretched across a dying empire, is enough to keep the gears turning, because when you worship a god who never speaks, the next best thing is finding someone who does, even if their voice burns the galaxy to ash.
They called her Saint Meridia the Burning Voice. On the world of Sanctum Helios, she appeared amid a tide of blood and fire. A lowly medica from the underhive, no one remembered her family name. They remembered only the light, how it burst from her hands when the orcs came, how her voice carried through the smoke, calling the terrified to stand. And they did. Thousands rose behind her.
Wounded men walked, dead men breathed. The green tide broke before her radiance. Entire battalions swore they saw the emperor himself standing behind her, smiling. The orcs burned. The skies cleared. And for the first time in decades, Sanctum Helios knew peace. The ecclesiarchy declared it a miracle. But miracles in the 41st millennium are rarely merciful. Months passed. Pilgrims came from across the sector to see her, to hear her voice. She preached no grand theology, no complex creed. She only said one thing. The emperor is still among us, not above. Among them. It was a beautiful lie, because in that one sentence she contradicted 10,000 years of dogma. To the ecclesiarchy she was both a blessing and threat. Her words inspired entire planets to rise from despair, and to question the priests who kept them in it. Soon, riots broke out. Workers refused to pay tithes. Soldiers refused to burn their dead for the throne's fuel. The idea of Meridia spread faster than her light, and for the first time, faith itself began to fracture. When the Inquisition arrived, they came not with banners, but with silence. Inquisitor Halbrecht, an old man with eyes like glass, led the investigation. He watched Meridia speak before a crowd of 50,000 souls. He saw the light radiating from her skin. He heard her call the emperor our brother. And then he ordered her death. If she is false, he said, she dies a liar. If she is true, she dies a god. Either way, humanity cannot afford her. They executed her in the Basilica of Flame. She didn't resist. When the bolt round struck her chest, she smiled. Her body turned to ash before it hit the ground. For 3 days, the planet burned with riots. Then, nothing. The ecclesiarchy declared her heresy purged. The Inquisition sealed the records. The pilgrims who had seen her began to vanish, taken by the Arbites, re-educated, erased. But in the ruins of Sanctum Helios, people still whisper her last words. He walks with us, and sometimes, when the wind moves through the cathedrals at night, the ash stirs. Some say it glows faintly, others say it hums, like a voice carried through eternity. Whether she was divine or deluded, no longer mattered. Her faith changed the galaxy, if only for a moment. Because in that moment, humanity dared to imagine the emperor not as a god, but as one of them, and for that, she had to die. The closer you come to terror, the heavier the air feels. It isn't atmosphere, it's history, the psychic weight of 10,000 years of worship and war, pressing down upon a single world. Every breath on holy terror tastes of incense and ashes. Every whisper is half a prayer. From orbit, it shines like a jewel, but only because the light of a billion fires never dies. Cities wrap the planet in steel and stone. The oceans are gone, replaced by cathedrals, so vast they blot out the horizon. At the heart of it all stands the Imperial Palace, a continent of towers built on bones and faith. And within that palace lies the golden throne, where a corpse still rules an empire of the living. For the High Lords of Terror, hope is not a word. It is a currency. They trade it in decrees and doctrines, in the illusion of divine order. Each one knows the truth, that the Imperium runs not on faith, but on fear. The bureaucracy of 1,000,000 departments exists solely to keep the illusion alive. The administratum measures lives by the ton. The Adeptus Mechanicus feeds entire worlds into reactors just to power the throne's machinery. The Navis Nobilite navigates the warp through madness, and the Ecclesiarchy sells salvation in exchange for obedience. No one believes the Imperium can be saved, but no one dares let it die. In the throne's shadow, Inquisitor Kyle Vedratus walks the halls of dust, where the air itself hums with the dying pulse of psychic energy. He has seen the underhives, the battlefields, the choirs that sing themselves to death. But nothing compares to this silence. A silence so deep it feels alive. Every day 10,000 psychers are sacrificed here, their minds burned to ash to feed the Emperor's flame. Their screams echo through the warp, holding back the tide of chaos for one more day. Kale watches the ritual, and for a moment, even he believes it's worth it. But then he sees the next 1,000 being led in, shackled, terrified, praying to the god who will devour them. He wonders how long the Emperor can endure a faith that feeds on his own children. Above the throne, in the sanctum of the Adeptus Custodes, warriors of gold stand unmoving. They have watched their god rot for 10 millennia, and still they wait, not for orders, but for purpose. They no longer protect the Emperor. They protect the idea of him, and perhaps that's all that's left to protect. Hope on Terra isn't found in prayer. It's in the smallest rebellion, a scribe who writes truth into a forgotten ledger, a custodian who remembers the Emperor's voice rather than his silence. Because even in the palace of gods, humanity whispers a quiet heresy. He was one of us once, and that whisper, more than all the faith in the galaxy, is what keeps the throne burning. Beneath the glittering cathedrals of terror, there is rot. Kale Veritas descended through levels forbidden to all but the Emperor's most trusted servants, a maze of tunnels older than recorded history. The air was heavy with ozone and decay. Every surface hummed faintly, vibrating with the pulse of machinery that should not still function. This was the throne's undercarriage, the labyrinth that kept the Emperor alive, and it was dying. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus scuttled through the darkness, their forms more machine than man. Cables writhed from their backs like veins. They chanted Binharic prayers to appease the machine spirits of forgotten devices, patching ancient conduits with their own blood when sealant ran dry. Kale watched them work, realizing none of them truly understood what they were maintaining. "How long?" he asked. The Magos accompanying him twitched, servo skulls hovering anxiously around its head. "It functions by his will. That is all that matters." "That's not an answer. It is the only one left." The Magos led him deeper, into a chamber, where the walls pulsed with faint light, a living artery of the machine itself. The hum grew louder here, like a heartbeat slowed by exhaustion. Kale approached a viewing platform. Through the thick glass he saw them, the psychers, thousands of them, chained to thrones of copper and bone. Their eyes glowed, their mouths moving in silent agony. Energy arced between them in pale tendrils, feeding upward into the unseen structure above, the golden throne's conduits of sacrifice. Each one died slowly, their souls burned away to keep the Emperor's light alive. 10,000 every day, the Magos whispered. Each one fuels the beacon that guides mankind through the void. Kale stared in horror, and when there is no more to feed it, the Magos didn't answer. Somewhere in the dark a voice began to whisper, soft, like the echo of memory. Kale's. The voice was familiar, feminine, calm, warm, Leira Ven. But she died years ago. "You see it now," she said. "The Emperor endures because you force him to. His light is your hunger made divine. This is the only way," Kale shouted, though the Magos didn't react. He wasn't hearing it, only Kale was. "No," she whispered. This is not endurance. This is fear, dressed as faith. The lights flickered. For a moment Kale saw not the psychers below, but faces, billions of them, all across the galaxy, their eyes turned toward terror, their prayers feeding this endless engine. It wasn't divinity keeping the Emperor alive, it was humanity itself. The Magos spoke again, breaking the trance. You should leave now, Inquisitor. Prolonged exposure invites contamination. Kale turned from the glass, but his reflection lingered a moment longer, his own face staring back at him, whispering words he did not speak. He is not the only one burning. Kale Veritas stood once more before the golden throne. Its radiance filled the sanctum like sunlight through storm clouds, golden, sacred, and utterly wrong. The smell of ozone and burning incense mixed with the faint copper tang of blood. The air trembled with psychic pressure vibrating against his bones. He had seen the underworks now. He had heard the whispers in the dark. He knew what the Emperor's light truly was, and he could never unsee it. The High Lords of Terror waited on their raised thrones, faces veiled by shadow and augmetic halos. Their voices echoed like judgment. You trespassed where no man should walk, said the Chancellor of the Administratum. You looked upon the sacred machinery of mankind's salvation, hissed the Ecclesiarch. And now, you dare to question it. Kale's voice was steady, but his heart hammered like a war drum. You call it salvation. I call it consumption. The chamber fell silent. Even the servitors paused their chanting. I have seen what fuels him, Kale continued. 10,000 psychers each day, their souls devoured to keep a corpse alive. You claim his will commands it, but I tell you this, it's our will that keeps him chained. We can't let go of the light, even if it kills us. The custodes stepped forward, golden giants in motionless silence. One spoke, his voice deep, ancient. The sound of patience turned to iron. The Emperor's light must never die. If it fades, the warp will consume all. Kale met the warrior's gaze. Then perhaps we deserve to be consumed. Perhaps this, he gestured toward the throne, the unending hum of agony, is not salvation, but a prison. The custodian raised his halberd, its blade gleaming in the light of the god machine. You speak of treason, Kale smiled bitterly. No, I speak of grief. The light of the throne flared suddenly, brighter, deeper, almost aware. Every head turned toward it. The air grew heavy with an unseen presence. And then a voice, soft, ancient, infinite, filled the chamber. Let him speak. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, resonating in the marrow of every living thing in the room. The custodes fell to one knee. The High Lords froze, trembling. Kale's knees buckled. His vision was filled with gold. He heard them all, the psychers burning below, the billions praying above, the faint pulse of humanity's shared will, stretching across the galaxy. The Emperor's voice wasn't singular, it was choral. He is right, it whispered through the storm. You feed me with your fear. You chain me with your worship. You keep me alive because you cannot imagine a world without pain. Kale whispered, tears streaking his face. Then, what do you want of us? To learn what hope means without me. The light dimmed. The hum softened. The Emperor had spoken. In the silence that followed, the custodes rose, their faces unreadable. The High Lords whispered prayers through clenched teeth. Kale stood alone, knowing he had just heard what none dared dream. The god they worshipped did not want to be worshipped anymore. The Emperor had spoken. No lightning split the heavens, no thunder rolled across the stars. Only silence, vast, aching silence, as if the entire galaxy had paused to listen. On Terra, the Astronomican's light dimmed for exactly 7 seconds. Across 1,000,000 worlds, astropaths screamed, then fell quiet. Vox channels filled with static. Warp storms flickered out like dying flames. And in that stillness, a whisper reached every soul tuned to the Emperor's beacon. You chain me with your fear. For most, the message was dismissed as madness, a trick of the warp, a daimonic echo. The ecclesiarchy declared it blasphemy before the words even finished echoing. Priests called it a test of faith. The High Lords called it classified. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Because for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity had heard something new from the throne, and it wasn't commanded. It was doubtful. In the underhives of Necromunda, whispers spread like fire. The workers spoke of the quiet emperor, the one who mourned their pain. On Cadia Secundus, soldiers reported seeing golden light on the horizon before dawn, a warmth that vanished before the artillery began again. On Holy Terror, thousands of pilgrims swore that the statues in the Cathedral of the Sanguine Dawn shed tears, and in the hidden vaults of the Inquisition, Cael Veritas sat alone. Listening to the endless hum of the data archives, he replayed the message 1,000 times, each repetition burrowing deeper into his mind. You chain me with your fear. He had seen the truth beneath the throne. He had seen the blood, the sacrifice, the machinery of fate. Now he understood its purpose, not to keep the Emperor alive, but to keep humanity afraid of a world without him. Hope, Cael realized, had become the Imperium's greatest heresy, yet still, he could not hate them. The priests, the soldiers, the billions who prayed. They needed their God. They needed to believe that someone somewhere was listening, because what happens when they stop believing? When they realize the universe is indifferent, the warp endless, the stars cold. Even now, Cael wasn't sure. Even now part of him prayed. Above Terra, the Astronomicon flared again, brighter than ever before. Fleets across the Segmentum Solar saw it bloom across their viewing decks, a golden sphere pulsing with rhythm, like a heartbeat. For a brief moment, every navigator in the galaxy saw the same vision, a man, tall, robed in light, walking among the stars. He did not look like a god. He looked human, and then he spoke again, not to command, not to condemn, but to ask, will you carry the light without me? Across the void, billions wept, some in joy, some in terror, because the one truth no one had ever prepared for was simple. The Emperor of mankind might finally be letting go. The galaxy did not burn immediately. It trembled. For millennia the Imperium had known only one truth, that the Emperor was eternal, unchanging, and unquestionable. But now, he had spoken, and what he said had undone 10,000 years of certainty. Will you carry the light without me? No order, no decree. Just a question. A question that divided a civilization of 1,000,000 worlds. On Terra, the High Lords declared the message heresy, a psychic distortion, a test sent by chaos to sow doubt. But their sermons were hollow, their voices shaking, because deep down, even they had heard it. Not through the ears but through the soul. The ecclesiarchy panicked. Great shrines were set ablaze in ritual cleansing. Preachers screamed that faith had been poisoned. Pilgrims were slaughtered in the streets, their only crime being that they whispered the forbidden words, "He doesn't want our worship anymore." In distant worlds rebellion took a new form, not born from hate, but from hope. Entire hives laid down their arms, refusing to fight in the Emperor's name. Some built temples not to him, but to the idea of him, the man who once walked among them, who bled, who dreamed of peace. Others went mad, unable to reconcile a god who could doubt. The warp itself shifted. Astropaths wept as their visions filled with impossible color, calm oceans, fields of light, glimpses of futures that did not end in fire. For the first time in human memory, the Imperium did not scream. It listened, and in that silence, something stirred, not daemon, not God, but humanity itself. Across 1,000 choirs, strikers began to speak in unison, though none knew why. We are not alone. Ships vanished into the warp and returned untouched, guided not by the Astronomicon, but by instinct, by faith not in a corpse, but in each other. It was as if the Emperor's light had bled into them all. Cael Veritas watched the madness unfold from the Hall of Penitence on Terra. Vox feeds filled the air around him. Reports of uprisings, miracles, mass suicides. You asked them to carry the light, he whispered, staring toward the throne's distant glow, but they don't know what to do with it. In the reflection of the gold-plated walls, he saw himself, exhausted, aging, still clutching the seal of the Inquisition like a relic of an old lie. Lyra's voice came to him again, soft and distant. They will learn. That's what he wanted. Cale closed his eyes. And if they don't, then they will die as they lived, fighting. He looked up through the sanctum's broken skylight, where the Astronomican's light pierced the clouds. It pulsed not like a command, but like a heartbeat. For the first time, Cale felt no fear, only understanding. The Emperor was not abandoning humanity, he was giving it back to itself. The stars were quiet. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but quiet in a way the galaxy had forgotten. The warp storms had calmed. The Astronomican glowed steady and soft, no longer a scream of psychic fire, but a steady pulse, like a dying man who had finally learned how to rest. And across the Imperium, humanity stood still, uncertain whether to pray or to listen. Inquisitor Kyle Veritas stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace, overlooking the endless sprawl of terror. The night was heavy with smoke and hymns. Fires burned in the distance. Riots, celebrations, mass suicides. Faith was collapsing and reforming in real time, like a star dying and being reborn. Behind him, the custodes stood in silence. Before him, the throne's light shimmered faintly across the clouds. He's fading, Cale said. He endures, one custodian answered, his voice flat, ritualistic. Endures. Cale turned, bitter laughter in his tone. You don't see it. He's letting go. The custodian didn't move. Humanity cannot survive without him. That's the lie we built everything on, Cale whispered. The lie he just took from us. He closed his eyes and felt the hum through the floor, the pulse of the throne, ancient and tired, and in it, beneath the static of 1,000 burning psychers, he felt something familiar, warmth. A memory, not of the Emperor as god, but as man. The teacher, the dreamer, the one who wanted mankind to walk without chains. Cale dropped to his knees, overcome not by reverence, but by sorrow. Why me? He whispered into the dark. Why show me this? And then, as before, the voice came, not from above, from within. Because you still fear. Fear? Cale breathed. After all this, I'm supposed to feel hope. No, the voice said softly. Fear is what keeps you alive. It is proof that you still remember what it means to be human. Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time he understood. The Emperor's last gift was not command, not salvation, not victory. It was a choice, to live without him, to fall without him, to hope without him. And in that freedom, humanity might finally become what he had always intended, something greater than the sum of its suffering. Cale rose, the stormlight glinting off his armor. He turned toward the throne one final time. Rest, father, he whispered. We'll carry the light now. The Astronomican pulsed once more, brighter than it had in centuries, then softened steady and calm. Across the galaxy, billions looked to the stars, and for one impossible instant, felt seen, not by a god, but by themselves. In the end, the Emperor's final mercy was not his protection, it was his silence. Because in that silence, humanity remembered how to speak. And though the galaxy remained dark, the light, however faint, was theirs.